The flickering holocron, its facets fractured by untold millennia, whispered of a truth buried deeper than the most ancient Sith catacombs. A truth the Jedi Council themselves conspired to inter. Imagine a time before the Jedi, before the Sith, when the Force flowed not as light or shadow, but as an untamed, primal current. Within this forgotten era, there existed a power. A technique whispered of only in the most forbidden scrolls, Force weaving. It was not about bending the Force to your will, but about interweaving your very essence with its raw flow. Becoming one with its creation and destruction, the Jedi, in their nascent wisdom, feared it. They saw its potential for absolute dominion. Yes, but also its capacity for absolute annihilation, a path not to mastery, but to dissolution. They purged all records, sealed away the holocrons, and condemned any who spoke of it as heretics. But the whispers never truly died. They resonated in the deepest corners of forgotten temples, within the minds of those who dared to seek true balance. Not the false duality preached by both Jedi and Sith. This power could mend what was broken, not just physically, but spiritually. It could rewrite the very destinies that the Force itself seemed to have ordained. Consider the implications. What if a consciousness, deeply attuned to this forbidden art, could reach across the veil of death? Not to merely communicate, but to reweave the thread of life itself. The galaxy was never meant to remember such a potent, terrifying gift. It was a power that bypassed the conventional flows. A direct conduit to the Force's primordial wellspring. A wellspring the Jedi actively suppressed, fearing the chaos it would unleash upon their meticulously constructed order. This was no mere dark side ability. It transcended light and shadow, existing in a realm both beautiful and terrifying. A realm that could unravel or rebind existence with a thought. The Jedi, in their arrogance, believed they had tamed the Force, categorizing its immense power into neat, predictable disciplines. But what if their very categorization was a form of self-deception, a deliberate blinding? We speak of Force mending, not the basic healing taught in Jedi academies, but a profound, almost alchemical process capable of reversing catastrophic physical and energetic damage. Imagine a body ravaged by the unique energies of a lightsaber. Tissues burned beyond recognition, the Force essence itself fractured. Conventional healing is useless. But the ancient practitioners of Force weaving understood something deeper. That the Force is fundamentally a force of creation. And creation implies the ability to mend what has been uncreated. This wasn't about channeling midichlorians, but about directly interfacing with the fundamental energy that binds atoms, that sustains life. It was a power so intimate, so profound, that it demanded an emotional and spiritual purity beyond the comprehension of most Jedi. The training involved not only intense meditation, but a complete surrender of ego, a willingness to become a conduit, not a wielder. The Jedi suppressed this knowledge because it highlighted the limitations of their own dogmatic approach. It implied that their understanding of life and death, of what was truly possible within the Force, was incomplete, even primitive. They feared a power that could seemingly defy the natural order, even though it was, in its purest form, an expression of that very order at a deeper, more profound level. They feared the moral complexities of reversing what they deemed irreversible. They feared a power that could blur the lines between life and death, between fate and choice. This wasn't resurrection in the traditional sense. It was a reaffirmation of life's inherent will to persist, guided by a consciousness deeply attuned to the Force's most fundamental principles of restoration. It was a truth too terrifyingly potent for their rigid doctrine. The true horror isn't just in the forgotten powers, but in the deliberate erasure. The Jedi Council, not just of the prequels, but stretching back to the earliest schisms, systematically eradicated any knowledge that threatened their monolithic control over the Force. Think of the Great Schism, not as a simple clash of ideals, but as a violent purge of those who sought a broader, more nuanced understanding of the Force. The first Dark Jedi weren't necessarily evil. Many were simply explorers, individuals who dared to question the Jedis. Increasingly narrow definitions, they sought to understand the Force's full spectrum, including its destructive and recreative aspects, not to exploit them for personal gain, but to comprehend the universe in its totality. They were deemed dangerous not because they embraced darkness, but because they embraced everything. The Jedi archives, presented as a repository of all knowledge, are in fact a testament to this suppression. Entire wings, entire sections of history were not just restricted, but utterly purged, their existence denied, their very memory erased from official records. Imagine holocrons of unimaginable power, containing techniques that could manipulate gravity itself, or bend space-time in localized fields, not for hyperdrive travel, but for instantaneous relocation, for rendering objects weightless, for creating protective barriers woven from the Force itself. These weren't mere legends. They were documented abilities, carefully categorized and then meticulously destroyed, their existence only hinted at in the most obscure and heretical texts. The Council feared not just the misuse of these powers, but the very knowledge of their existence. It revealed the Force as something far more malleable, far less constrained by their moral and philosophical constructs. It suggested that their rigid code was not a path to ultimate truth, but a cage, built to contain not only their students, but the Force itself. This systematic suppression created the very imbalance they claimed to fight, leading inevitably to the rise of an equally dogmatic and destructive dark side. The hidden hand extends beyond mere academic suppression. It reaches into the very fabric of galactic governance, manipulating events, nudging destiny towards a predetermined outcome. This is the Council of Whispers, an entity operating in the deepest shadows, predating both the Republic and the Empire. They are not Jedi nor Sith, but something far more ancient, far more insidious, the true architects of galactic history. Their agenda to maintain a fragile, artificial balance, a constant dance between light and dark, ensuring neither side ever truly triumphs, for true triumph would upset their carefully constructed equilibrium. They understand that absolute peace leads to stagnation and absolute war leads to annihilation. Their goal is sustained conflict, a controlled burn that keeps the galaxy pliable, predictable. This isn't about good or evil, it's about control. They influence the selection of Jedi Council members, subtly steered political appointments, and even orchestrated conflicts to weed out anomalies, those who threaten to truly break the cycle. Imagine the Separatist crisis not as a genuine conflict, but as a carefully curated event designed to usher in a new order, one still within the parameters of their grand design. They understand the Force not just as energy, but as information, and they've learned to read its currents, to predict nodal points of change, and to subtly alter them. The Jedi's fall, the rise of the Empire, even the ultimate victory of the rebellion, all were, to some extent, predictable, even desirable outcomes in their long game. They are the unseen puppeteers, their strings attached to the very destinies of Force sensitives, guiding them towards paths of predetermined conflict and limited understanding. This knowledge is dangerous because it reveals the illusion of free will, the cold, calculated manipulation that has shaped every major galactic event. It paints the Jedi and Sith as mere pawns in a cosmic game, their grand ideologies nothing more than convenient narratives for the true powers that lurk beneath the surface. Now, ask yourself, balance is a lie? Type that in the comments if you dare. The most terrifying secrets are often found not in grand archives, but in the echoes of forgotten places, where the Force itself remembers what mortals strive to forget. Deep within the core of Coruscant, far beneath the gleaming spires of the Republic and the Imperial Palace, lies a labyrinth of ancient tunnels, predating even the first hyperspace jumps. Here, buried beneath millennia of civilization, are the remnants of a primordial Force nexus, an untouched wellspring where the very consciousness of the galaxy resonated without filter. This is the true heart of the galaxy, and it holds not just power, but a living record of every thought, every emotion, every event that has ever transpired. It is a cosmic memory, and within its depths lie the visions that drove the earliest Force sensitives to madness or transcendence. Imagine communing with this primal essence not through meditation, but through a direct, overwhelming immersion. What would you see? Not just the past, but the myriad branching futures. The infinite possibilities that never came to be and the terrifying paths that still might. One particular prophecy, scrawled on the walls of a forgotten cavern near this nexus, spoke of a being who would defy fate, who would not simply choose between light and dark, but would reconcile them within themselves, becoming something entirely new, something neither Jedi nor Sith could comprehend. This prophecy was not of the chosen one. It was of the unbound one, a Force sensitive capable of wielding all aspects of the Force without corruption, of existing in perfect harmony with its chaos and its order. The Jedi Council, upon discovering this prophecy, saw it as an abomination, a threat to their entire philosophy. They believed that such a being was impossible, or worse, a gateway to ultimate destruction. They sealed off the Nexus, burying it not just under kilometers of durasteel and rock, but under layers of misinformation and fear. This prophecy was the real reason for their rigid adherence to the light, their absolute condemnation of anything that hinted at a broader understanding of the Force. They feared not the dark, but the whole, and in that fear they inadvertently pushed many towards the very darkness they sought to avoid. The betrayal wasn't merely ideological. It was deeply personal, woven into the very fabric of the Jedi Order's foundational myths. We are taught of the noble founders, the selfless protectors of peace. But what if the first Jedi were not unblemished beacons of light, but individuals who made a terrible choice? A primal betrayal that irrevocably warped the Force's perception for generations? Consider the legend of the Thousand-Year Darkness, not as a simple war between factions, but as a deliberate ritual, a vast, galaxy-spanning experiment conducted by the nascent Jedi Order to define and solidify their own understanding of the Force. They didn't just defeat the Darksiders. They extracted something from them, a fundamental understanding of the Force's true nature, and then systematically suppressed it. The prize, a permanent severing of the Force into distinct, opposing halves in the collective consciousness. They convinced the galaxy and themselves that light and dark were inherent, immutable opposites, when in truth they were two sides of a single, fluid current. This act of intellectual and spiritual amputation created the very conditions for the rise of the Sith, a reactionary force born from the suppressed truths. The first Jedi Masters didn't just banish the concept of a balanced Force. They actively enslaved it, bending its true nature to fit their limited, dogmatic worldview. They sacrificed wholeness for control, truth for order. This primal betrayal echoed down through the millennia, manifesting in every subsequent schism, every fear of deviation, every rigid adherence to the light. Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, was perhaps the closest the galaxy came to an unintentional undoing of this ancient wound. A Force sensitive powerful enough to glimpse the true, unified nature of the Force, even if his journey was ultimately corrupted by the very duality the Jedi had perpetuated. The Jedi, in their fervent desire for control and predictability, built a system that actively prevented the very balance they preached. They were the first, and perhaps the greatest, impediment to the Force's true expression. Now, I urge you, if you truly see beyond the veil of this deception, type this in the comments: I see beyond the veil. The path to true understanding often lies not in grand battles or political intrigue, but in the intimate, raw moments of profound loss and desperate choice. Let's revisit Mustafar not as the end of Anakin Skywalker, but as the potential beginning of something far more terrifyingly potent. What if Padmé Amidala, armed with a hidden knowledge, a desperate love, and a Force sensitivity far greater than history remembers, could have performed the unthinkable? Imagine Padme not as a helpless victim, but as a secret apprentice to a forgotten sect. Perhaps even one of the last true practitioners of Force mending. What if her lineage, going back generations, was tied to those ancient Force weavers, guardians of knowledge the Jedi erased. On Mustafar, as Anakin lay broken, burning, his agony a beacon in the Force, Padme's sorrow wouldn't have been just grief, but a catalyst. Her Force sensitivity, often dismissed as latent or negligible, would have flared, fueled by an emotional intensity capable of shattering conventional barriers. What if she didn't just mourn him, but reached into the raw Force itself, bypassing the midichlorian count, bypassing the limitations of conventional healing, to mend his fractured body and spirit? This isn't about saving a life, it's about rewriting a destiny. The Force mending we spoke of earlier isn't just physical, it's spiritual. It's the ability to knit together a soul torn by conflict, to realign a consciousness twisted by pain and fear. If Padme had possessed this forbidden knowledge, and if her love for Anakin had been the catalyst for such a profound Force act, she could have averted the birth of Darth Vader, but the cost? The sheer energy required would have been immense, perhaps even draining her own life force, or altering her forever. She would have become something else, something neither Jedi nor Sith. A living embodiment of the Force's raw, untamed restorative power. This would have shattered the carefully constructed narrative of the Chosen One's fall, revealing the Force not as a predetermined path, but as a river whose course can be drastically altered by acts of supreme will and forbidden knowledge. If Padme had indeed wielded such a power, the galaxy would have been irrevocably altered. Anakin Skywalker, not Darth Vader, would have emerged from Mustafar scarred but whole, his spirit rewoven, his connection to the Force no longer fractured by the artificial duality of light and dark. He would have been the prophesied unbound one, a living testament to the Force's true, unified nature, the Emperor. Sensing this radical shift, this defiance of his carefully orchestrated plan, would have been faced with an anomaly unlike any he could comprehend. His empire, built on the predictable ebb and flow of dark side power, would have crumbled before a Force he could neither categorize nor control. The Jedi, if any had survived, would have been forced to confront the colossal lie at the heart of their doctrine, the truth of their ancient betrayal. The very foundations of their order would have shattered, demanding a radical reevaluation of everything they believed. This alternative reality isn't just a fantasy. It's a terrifying possibility that reveals the inherent fragility of the established order, the precariousness of the galaxy's fate resting on a few carefully constructed myths. This knowledge, once it settles in your mind, changes everything. You can no longer see the Jedi as purely good or the Sith as purely evil. You see them as two sides of a coin, constantly flipping, both trapped within a cycle perpetuated by ancient deceptions and forgotten truths. The Force, in its true form, is not about light versus dark. It is about totality. It is about the boundless potential that lies beyond the dogma, beyond the fear, beyond the chosen narratives. This is the truth the galaxy was never meant to remember, a truth that, once known, frees you from the illusions and forces you to see the true nature of power, of destiny, and of the Force itself. You can never unsee this. The veil has been lifted. What will you do with this knowledge?